I'm happy to see that the technology is already pushing forward into the industry, where not just Apple Watch and the Samsung Gear watches are available, but you can see a smartwatch from Breitling and Frederic Constant, high-end brands in a very interesting market. And it would be great if the medical industry would make more use of all the devices that are already available and that I now use to monitor my own health. But the consumer reality, at least mine in this example, is that on a Sunday morning when I ask for Best of Wagner, I get reggae classics. And when I listen to Survivor, it was on the radio, so I decided, hey, that's a long time ago, let's try it again. Spotify recommends me to listen to Coolio. Now, that might not be as illogic as it seems, because it happens to be that I like 90s hip-hop. So I can understand why this recommendation ends up on my screen. But in terms of an experience, it's really crappy. Because when I listen to Survivor, Coolio is not the next best thing I want to listen to, probably. We've already seen this example from the previous speaker, but there are a bunch of situations where corporates show that there's a lot to be learned from using AI. And imagine me sitting in the room with my developer, talking about how I want to use Facebook for a quick customer test, and the response that I would get from IT security, legal, and the data protection officer. This is reality, and they're not screaming at me. They are pointing fingers at me, but they're not screaming at me. But it's difficult to do something innovative and something entrepreneurial when you live and work in an industry that is usually trying to avoid risks and doesn't really like experimentation. And why would you want to experiment with data, which is private property, I would say? This morning, I read about the Californian governor proposing that your own data would be protected and that you would actually have it monetized. You would be paid in order to give your data to corporates. And you can make money of it because it has value. So looking at the reality of AI and the energy industry, we are working with a situation where Chinese companies offer their AI options to us, their solutions. But in China, the government is the owner of your data. In the US, tons of companies who want to work with us, the corporates own your data. And in Europe, we want to work with a situation where you are the owner of your own data. Imagine what that would mean for us as an industry and for the usage of data. Remember that I want to get rid of all the newsletters with golden retrievers. If my industry can no longer use all this data about who I am and what I do and how I behave, how can they make relevant offerings for me? Oh, this is not going right. GDPR is a very good thing, and it helps us think of how to manage risks and how to organize your company in the usage of data based on the worst case scenario. But there are people outside who actually want a better scenario. And how can we test this? A huge learning opportunity for us. Then we have another issue, which is called the sea of dudes problem. So we already saw that data and machine learning and AI can be biased, and this is exactly what's happening because of the sea of dudes problem. But on top of that, where do these dudes work? What is the attractiveness of our industry, and how can we get them to work for us? We have hundreds of computer science students in the Netherlands, and I think last year we only recruited one of them, because apparently we're not a very attractive employer. And think of what AI would mean for us in an operational perspective. How do we handle the loads of data? We are a product, a 100-year product of mergers and acquisitions. We have tons of systems in place. We have tons of different data solutions. How do we bring this all together? And how do we access and democratize this data in order for our data scientists to do the really cool stuff instead of producing lists that answer questions that relate to the now instead of the future? And can we get access to other data sources than the regular ones that we own? I want to work with all the corporates here in the room, thinking of creative propositions for you, you the consumer and you the business. But it's really difficult to combine these data sources from a technical perspective, but also from a legal perspective. How can we balance short-term gains with long-term investments? It's a discussion we've had when we were thinking about investing in digital assistants or in RPA. My reasoning was, the more you cut out of your cost to serve on the short term, the more difficult it will be to create a good business case for something more expensive and more advanced in the near future.